All my life, I've always considered myself to be one of those lucky people who didn't have to worry about their weight or what they wanted to eat. Basically, I've always been this skinny guy with a sweet tooth. I've never really had to worry about what I was eating. And confession, I've actually not weighed myself for the last 2 years. Probably a doctor weighed me at some stage about 2 years ago. But as I've gotten older, I've noticed that my sort of strength and stability in training is more difficult. The work is harder, and I'm not a young gun anymore. I think my muscles need a bit more upkeep. In addition, I have a tendency to fade at the end of marathons. It's kind of almost becoming a standard thing with me, and I'm pretty sure I probably need to think a little bit more about my nutrition. What about you guys? So hi and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to try something new. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk with author Lauren Antonucci about her super new book, High Performance Nutrition for Masters Athletes. Fuel smartly and efficiently at age 35 and beyond.
So if you haven't guessed already, this book is all about nutrition. It's based on overall good habits with some tweaks geared towards athletes and in particular, older athletes. It's divided into 3 parts. So changing physiology of the master's athlete, where Lauren defines what a master's athlete is, demystifying age-related changes, and nutritional strategies to manage and prevent disease. Part 2 is smart fueling. So some of the topics covered are energizing carbohydrates, muscle building protein, healthy fats, supplements, fluid needs, and underfueling. And nutrient timing is the 3rd part, which covers pre-competition fueling, competition defueling, and recovery nutrition. So Lauren is a registered dietitian. She has a bachelor's degree in psychobiology from Binghamton University. Hopefully I said that right. A master's degree in clinical nutrition from New York University, and was awarded a fellowship in nutritional biochemistry at the University of California. If that's not enough, she's also a board certified sports dietitian, an eating disorder specialist and diabetes educator, founder and director of her company, Nutrition Energy, founded in 2003. She wrote a monthly column for Triathlete magazine for 3 years and wrote for New York Road Runners for over a decade. So we're very happy to welcome Lauren Antonucci.
Hi, Lauren.
Hello, Liz, Alan. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I guess the first question is, how did you decide to write this book, and who are you hoping to help?
Ooh, good question. So I actually feel like I should just make up a better answer to that question. I didn't specifically
we like the
decide
made-up answers the best.
Okay, it came to me in a dream. No, I didn't necessarily decide to write this book. I will say lots of clients and friends and family have been telling me for years, oh, you say this in a practical way and you have information, you should put it into a book. And my answer was always, well, when our kids are in college, maybe I'll have time. And our kids are not in college now, 2 years later. So the book is finished. Our children are 15, 13, and 10. So clearly all still around and, needing a lot of attention. The publisher actually came to me and asked me to write the book, at which point I was flattered, ridiculously excited, and overwhelmed. And it took me a matter of hours to kind of think about it, flutter home, call 2 friends who both said, you sound really excited about this. Tell my husband, who I thought could easily say, are you crazy? Where are you going to fit this in? But he also said, you sound really excited about this. At which point I realized, which I had known from a few hours before, that I was excited. And like most of us know, you decide to train for a race or sign up for something and then you make the time. So that's exactly what happened.
That's amazing.
I'm pretty intrigued about one thing in your bio, Lauren, that you have a degree in psychobiology.
What on earth does that mean?
Yes.
So I always say that the university, Binghamton University, so well done, Liz, was playing a trick on us when they called it that. But basically, it's the physiological basis of behavior. So how brain drives behavior. So it actually informs a lot of the way I think, no pun intended, and practice, in that we as humans are wired certain ways. Our brains, super smart, they work super fast, they go in patterns. It's really interesting to understand that. And so that was my undergrad work. And then it led me through nutrition. And then at Berkeley, I did the nutritional biochemistry, where I learned all about what the gut does. And between those two things, I think that's where the fun lies in nutrition and sports nutrition, because, anyone can say, eat more fruits. Anyone can say, don't eat a bean burrito before you go for a marathon. We already know that. But how do we read the science, apply it with our human brain and our human gut, and put it into action, is where I'm still excited. So,
and I guess once we get on to, and it'll come up later in the conversation, once we get on to eating disorders and psychological effects around eating, that puts you in a position where you understand almost both ends of the problem, the nutritional part and the psychological part.
For sure. I mean, anyone with a true eating disorder, obviously, the best team has a dietitian that understands their nutritional needs, but also the psychological aspect, a medical doctor, of course, to be running labs and checking on medical situation, and then a therapist, psychologist, and/or psychiatrist. But there is, of course, a lot of overlap in how we all work as a team. When it works well, we do all collaborate as a team, because it's interdisciplinary for sure.
I think like, just an aside, I'm really interested to see what comes out of all the research that they do with the microbiome, because, I've read a little bit about it. And then, every so often there's a podcast with with somebody that's been studying it for a while. And it's fascinating, because apparently all our emotions might be linked to that sort of gut-brain axis.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out what they find out with all that research.
It's going to be unfolding for a long time, because there literally is an entire world in there that was completely uninvestigated before. And so, most of the science was, how does this vitamin or mineral affect this chemical compound or biopathway? And as they start looking at the microbiome, I'm with you. I've been reading anything and everything I can on the gut microbiome. It is fascinating. We know a lot more now than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago, but there is a lot more that we will be learning.
Oh, yes.
I'm already feeling like a third wheel invited to a date between two nutritional nerds. So let me wind it back a little bit. Okay, this book that you've written is focused towards masters athletes. Are masters athletes, are they the same in all sports? So are we talking about 35 plus, basically? If you get to my age, like I'm 62, is there like an ultra masters? Do I get a
master plus?
Yeah, like a double master.
No. I mean, in running, you still get your age graded results. So that continues, and there are, many brackets. No, different sports. And I interviewed different athletes in the book that had come from different sports backgrounds. And, the swimmers will say, we're masters at 18. That's the end of that. It's like, okay. And other sports will define it slightly differently. So there's some nuance between and among sports, but 35 is generally considered the tipping point for masters athletes. And for the purpose of this, I kind of looked at, we're using 35, we're looking at research at people over 35 across the board.
It's more the physiology of how old you are versus how long you've been in the sport, or yeah.
So that's a really good question. I mean, of course, that factors in. We've all seen the effects of, and we all love to run, and nobody likes to be told, and I don't even want to say out loud that, maybe running for 40 years is a little bit damaging to my body, or 60 years, or however long I'll keep going. But there's something to be said for the new fresh legs of a runner who starts at 60. They're going to see a lot more improvement, and they just have less wear and tear over the years. But in terms of the physiological changes, they're similar. In terms of our nutritional needs changing, they're similar. That newer runner, maybe they're coming from a different sport, maybe their muscle mass is different. They have different power. They'll be making gains in muscle mass and speed, where we're trying to hang on, because we have, as we were just discussing before, we've got these times we ran 10, 15 years ago that we're trying to see, can I do that again? They don't have that. So it's all, PR. It's like the new track. Our college got a new track, and the first track meet, we all had, the track PR. That was a fun day.
I guess what changes in terms of nutritional needs, if anything, for older athletes?
Well, yes, there are things that change, obviously. I think the big one that stands out for a lot of people, the one that clients, friends, and strangers are emailing me about the most, or even some of the athletes that I interviewed in the book that are 60, 70, 80 years old, they said, oh no, I didn't know this. Is it too late? And since you said you both read the book, you're probably not going to be surprised when I say protein. Protein is the big thing, and especially those of us of a master's athlete age and beyond. If I think back to when I was a runner in high school and college, how often did I use the word protein in a sentence around training? Never, right? Never. Maybe one science teacher talked about it once. I thought it was for the strength training athletes, and we ate bagels and power bars, bananas, pasta. Protein was for other people. That was wrong. And we've learned. So maybe the new younger athletes will know more about protein. So they'll have a leg up on us there, knowing how important it is for recovery. But then newer research we're finally seeing in both more in female athletes, and then more in, I'm going to keep using the word masters because I don't like the word older, but masters athletes, is that our protein needs actually really go up. And so we need more protein post-workout and overall throughout our day in order to stimulate that same muscle protein synthesis. So that's where, just as it sounds, we're repairing and rebuilding our muscles. So just as Alan was saying before in his intro, when we talk to anyone who's been running a while, you hear the same story, right? My strength and my power, like those are the first things people really start to feel, or the flexibility. We start to notice that. So protein needs really go up.
I'm the nutritional ignoramus in the room. So, but I was sort of always taught, oh, have a protein shake or something, or within half an hour of finishing your workout, figure on taking a protein drink or a protein bar, or having a snack with some protein in it. Is that still good advice, or is that,
it is still
that
good
not
advice.
enough? Is that not enough?
It is still good advice. And I guess where the shift is that, I don't know how old you were when someone started telling you that, but nobody was saying that to me back, again, when I was running competitively in high school, college, which was arguably a long time ago. But still, a lot of the time, even now, not to fault any company particularly, but you'll hear a lot, if we had to take a poll, I always play the game show. What's the most common answer? How many grams of protein do you need after a workout? Do you want to play? What would you say? How many grams do you think you need before the book? Would you say 20?
If you go by what's usually
10.
in the protein bars, like there's usually, some of the ones that have lower amounts have 10 or 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you'll read a lot in magazines, on products, online. Of course, you can read anything online by anyone all the time, which doesn't help. But yeah, and you might look at a product that's geared for recovery and has the word recovery on it. And then we're going to make an assumption that this meets my recovery needs. But of course, that's not always true. So maybe they'll have 10 grams. If we're really lucky, they'll have 20 grams. And as masters athletes, that's usually not enough. If we have a product that's really high in leucine, or if we make a shake and we include, some leucine and some of those branched chain amino acids that are absolutely integral in that protein synthesis step and in recovering and repairing our muscles, we're closer. But otherwise, if you're coming home and eating food, eating a meal, eating a bar, eating a snack, then we need 20 to 30 to even 40 grams of protein. And I think just to drive it home, in case we haven't already gotten people to say, maybe I should pause this podcast, stop my run and go get a protein rich snack, or use my Apple Pay on my way home from my run to buy some high protein foods because I think I need them when I get home. When they look at studies in masters athletes, and these were specifically endurance athletes, they see that masters athletes tend to eat less protein after a workout than their younger counterparts. So our needs almost double, and masters athletes tend, without thinking about it, without purposefully taking in more, to eat less. And that could be a combination of reasons. why we're not eating that protein. Maybe we're thinking a little bit more about getting older. Maybe I shouldn't eat as much, or you're not hungry and you're just waiting a little while, either because you're so busy and going to work, or if you're lucky enough to be retired and can just relax, out in your beautiful lawn chair on a beautiful day for an hour before you get hungry. So there's a real miss or disconnect between, masters athletes intake and then our needs really going up.
Yeah, just to tell you how that's affected me just recently, just from my protein conscious position. I got this bar from the supermarket. It's a protein bar. So I thought I'll put it in my bag. And then when I finish my run, I'll eat the bar. And I'm thinking, I'm the man. I know what I'm doing here with protein, supplementing myself after runs.
I was
I'm
there
an
on
old
that
guy,
day.
so I need. Yeah, you were there when I looked at it. After we read the book, I was looking at the bar and I said, I've been eating these for a year, and these are just damn cereal bars with the word protein written on the front because it has 10 grams in it.
So
And
he would have had to eat 4.
10 grams is like nothing. Like I'm thinking of,
Right.
like a week ago, I was eating it thinking I was some sort of nutritional superhero. And then this weekend, I'm looking at it with Liz thinking, oh, what a bozo I am. I'm not doing it at all.
No, I think that's a really great story. And I would say thank you for sharing, because we all fall into that boat on different things. And to just say, again, it's really important to make sure you get, and as athletes, we get really good information, whether it's on nutrition or stretching or something, and make sure that our source of information is really good and that we understand our needs. And so, I find the research on nutrition and physiology fascinating, and I'm happy to read it. And there's research on other things that bore me to tears, like how my computer works. Somebody else can read that and they can help me with my computer, and I'll talk about nutrition. So we each have our thing.
Yeah, Liz said to me, I said, I got this protein bar, haha. And Liz said to me, how much protein does it have in it? And I said, I don't know, but it says protein in big letters on the front.
So you guys are in Canada. I don't know the exact rules there as well as I do. I'm in the US, right? I live in New York.
Sure.
So I don't know what the rules are there in terms of, there are legal rules behind every single word that can be on a label. Low fat, low sugar, high this, high that. So to use the word protein, I don't know what the answer is there. Like, what's the threshold? It might be very low.
Yeah, I don't know what the threshold is. I know for some things, like to be listed fat-free, I think it has to have less than 0.5 grams or something.
That's the same.
Yeah, I know that there are thresholds, but it does have protein. It has 10 grams, for a cereal bar. That's more than
and it tells
2.
you on the label.
It probably started off with 2 before somebody said, oh, people are looking for protein. Let's add some whey or soy or pea or hemp.
Exactly.
But as you quickly said, it can't be a great idea and it can't be enjoyable to eat 4 of them. I can't imagine that to be the case. So we might need to just bulk up the strategy with something else.
Yeah.
If I could just rewind you a little bit while we were talking, when we started this protein discussion, you mentioned a substance, leucine. Just for our listeners who may or may not have already read the book. If you haven't, listeners, you'll need to go and read the book after this and we'll tell you where to get it. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about leucine.
Sure. So leucine is one of the branched chain amino acids. So the amino acids you may have heard are the building blocks of protein. We used to say, or I didn't say it, but I remember in elementary school, we would hear people say, if you're a vegetarian, you need to get all these different vegetarian sources of protein at one meal so you can get a complete protein, right? That was a thing. Then we learned, no, you don't have to get them all in one meal as long as you get them all in some reasonable amount of time over the course of the day. But really, in terms of stimulating muscle growth, muscle protein synthesis, muscle recovery, there's some proteins that work better than others and really just turn that on and light up that process. So as athletes, but I would also argue as anyone walking around on this planet after 3 or 4 decades should also, even if you're not an athlete, should also be concerned about maintaining muscle mass, because that's a huge predictor of longevity and, let's say, lack of disability, right? From maintaining muscle mass, not falling down. And for us, we're not even worried about the maintaining muscle mass and not falling down. I want to keep running fast and I want to keep recovering and feeling well. And in doing so, I'll protect all that other stuff too. So it's really important to look at the source of protein. And so whey protein is the most highly or heavily researched and the most popular, especially in post-workout supplements or bars. If you grabbed a cereal bar from the grocery store, that could have whatever kind of protein the cereal company put in there. But many of the sports marketed supplements are at least onto the fact that there is research to support. And leucine, isoleucine, and valine are the 3 essential amino acids that are most potent in stimulating this muscle protein synthesis. And we can talk about the benefit of taking some of those before or during workouts for specific groups of people at specific times. Maybe specifically peri and postmenopausal women can really benefit from a little more branched chain amino acids before and after. But maybe I went on a long tangent to answer your question, but maybe I have also answered it.
It's super fine. And
Okay.
We like long tangents.
so whey protein contains leucine.
Yes.
So if you see some ingredient that says whey protein, probably it's got the essential amino acids that you're looking for, particularly.
Right. But some of the other research, because there's been, I don't want to say debate, an interesting topic of discussion among researchers and sports dietitian for the past several years of, well, do we really just need leucine? Or can you get the same benefit being recovery and repair of muscle tissue, which we damage in our training. That's part of the point of training. Always sounds funny, but go out there. I did a speed workout on the track this morning. There'll be some muscle damage. Maybe it won't be terrible, but there'll be some. I want to repair and recover because I'd like to run again, tomorrow or the next day or soon, not in 3 weeks time. So all that's important. But the research is also showing, and specifically in masters athletes, if you don't want to deal with any of that and you're not into supplements and you don't want to worry about the leucine versus the whatever other amino acids, then we just need a bit more protein. So then it's just go through, and in the book, I do have charts on protein contents of different foods. And we kind of go through a lot of the things we're talking about here, and probably other things we'll talk about to make it easier for people to go, well, how do I get 40 grams of protein? Or when we talk about carbs, how do I get that? So to really start looking at labels and say, okay, I need 40, this cereal bar has 10, or this Greek yogurt has 13 or 16. Or how many does 2 eggs have? Well, you're not supposed to know that, but you can Google it, or it's in the book and you say, okay, 2 eggs is 14. Oh, geez, I'm not getting to 40 anytime soon. But if you do,
Yeah, that's
and you
a lot
say
of food.
2 eggs, it is a lot of food, which is probably why masters athletes, they found, are not really doing a great job. But I think it's also a point of prioritizing. And here's the nutrient timing is after a workout, we really need to be conscious of getting in enough protein. So 30 or 40 grams, which if you really think about it, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. So we're talking 120 to 160 calories of protein. That's not a huge amount, right? And we're all runners here. Our calorie needs are decent. We're not
And a half a chocolate
70
bar.
years old and sitting around, right?
Yes, but so now I think that's a great segue for the next topic of conversation, because in our meals for recovery and for, optimal performance in endurance sports, well, we also have to plan some carbs. So in addition to those 40 grams of protein, we're going to also have to ingest some carbs, and it can be surprisingly a lot.
Yes. I hear your hesitation. I will say I am extremely used to that. The first easiest way to think about that is, can we just think for a second about this whole breakfast, lunch, dinner, the way we've been fed since we were kids. Now, maybe other people grew up differently than I did, but we were fed this breakfast again here in the Northeast US, cereal or something quick and easy, get out the door in the morning. Lunch for us was often a sandwich with random sides, which depending on what your parents valued, might have been a cupcake or it might have been a fruit. And, whether or not you ate that, we're not sure. And
well, you don't, if you don't like to eat it, you trade it with your buddy at school.
That's right.
So you have no idea what your kids ate, really.
You don't, unless you find it in the backpack molding a couple of weeks later, which I will say, has happened to us once or twice.
We used to find all the crusts from the sandwiches from our kids. They never eat the
Yes,
crusts,
yes.
So we go, well, at least they ate something.
Or someone did.
Yeah.
And then traditionally, many people will have their biggest meal at dinner. Now that may be fine, but what if we're a morning runner, right? I've always been a morning runner. Well, then we've got morning runners running in the morning, eating this little breakfast, walking around hungry, not recovered, starving all day. And then into another topic would be then the confusion or guilt about, why am I so hungry? Why can't I concentrate? So I think it's really, to answer your question in the best way, maybe we just think of, hey, a pretty decent sized meal, possibly our biggest meal, but definitely a significant meal has to be after that workout, if I care about my recovery and my longevity in sport. So my breakfast, I've had occasions where I've gone to my kids' Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, and I went after a run and I brought my breakfast, this huge bowl of oatmeal with nuts and chia seeds and fruit and yogurt. And I had a big, tall dude, jiu-jitsu guy. Are you going to eat all that? You know, one of those typical runner questions. Like, yes, I am. You know,
Just watch me.
I just ran however long, and like this makes sense. So I'm very used to people thinking, and I'm glad you brought it up, wow, that sounds like a lot. But if we reframe and people think about it, well, wait a minute, what happens if you eat just a piece of toast or a small bowl of, you know, kid-sized cereal for breakfast? You're starving, right? Maybe you're eating candy at the office. Maybe you're eating your kids' food. Maybe you're cranky, all kinds of things that are probably not ideal. Maybe you're sore and not recovering. So really think about, that's never the place to skimp on anything, right? So getting in a good dose of protein, an even bigger dose of carbs. But so I'm not into having people talk about calories, but maybe we're saying, yeah, you've got to invest at least 500-600 calories in that post-workout meal. And it's 100% worth it every single time.
So actually, I really liked what you said in the book, because you said like, well, instead of having like 3 meals a day, because that's what we were sort of brought up to do, like you have 3 meals a day. Well, how about like you have 5 meals a day instead? Because then you kind of have a meal in between the meals, and the
And you're
meals
talking
become
my
smaller.
language now. Second breakfast is my favorite.
Yeah, and actually it makes me it justifies my, because I'm the type, like, I'm not really hungry at night. I'm not like most people, like they'll have their biggest meal in the evening, but I'm usually, by then I'm not hungry anymore, because I've already had breakfast and second breakfast and lunch and snack, and then like by the time you get to the evening, well, you're tired of eating, so, and you're not hungry anymore, because I mean, you just ran, because usually our workouts are, our hard workouts, sorry, are in the evening. I mean, I do easy runs in the morning, but I'm usually hungry after those. But after a hard workout, you're less hungry. I really, I really like that sort of tip. And also, I guess it just justifies why I always had so many snacks in the office, and my colleagues would look over and always be like, what are you eating now?
Crazy runner girl eating again. It's fine. That's why you have to have some runner friends so they understand. But yeah, not everybody will work out best eating 5 meals a day. But I just think, you know, the way we talk to ourselves and think about things is so important. Like, think about, again, use the marathon just because it's long. And all you ultra runners, you can say it's not long, but we're going to agree it's long. So, you know, or you pick a half marathon or whatever distance is a reach for someone. It could be a 10K. How am I ever going to do this? Well, you're going to break it up and you're going to start slowly and you're going to train. We're very used to that language. So if we think about food, if I'm starving in between meals, that's not a character flaw. It doesn't mean I'm supposed to try not to be hungry. This is physiology. That's like saying, I'm going to go to work and I'm not going to use the bathroom all day because I don't want to leave my desk. Either you're going to be dehydrated or you're going to be sitting there so uncomfortable that you can't work. It doesn't work. So we can't do that with hunger, or we shouldn't. So really listening and saying, wow, I'm eating this great breakfast, but at 11 o'clock, I'm hungry again because breakfast was a few hours ago. So I can pretend to just eat a few pretzels or a couple of nuts, and then I can wonder why I'm starving at lunch and then again at 1. Or you can kind of go, oh, you know what? It just makes sense. I'm an athlete. I'm hungry. Maybe I need a half a sandwich and a piece of fruit. Or maybe building snacks into, it might be a full-size meal. It might be a mini meal. It might be 2 breakfasts and a lunch. For other people, it might be 1 breakfast and 2 lunches. but just thinking about it. And it also helps us to ensure we're meeting our nutritional needs, because when I say the word snack, immediately thoughts and pictures pop into people's heads, and different foods will probably pop into your head, or different combinations. You know, you say snack, someone says granola bar, chips, ice cream, pretzels. I say meal, you start thinking of different combinations of foods.
That's fair. So I guess the topic that we're probably all dying to hear about
Ooh.
is the amount of carbs that you should consume during a marathon, because it's a lot. So let's say for, I mean, I guess most runners will run a 4-hour marathon. You mentioned that that 60 grams per hour is sort of like an amount. And that's actually an amount that I think a lot of people may have heard, because I mean, I've heard that amount a lot. You said you could also, if you train, you could get up to being able to use 90 grams per hour. And
Maybe
that's
sometimes.
I guess with lots of training. I mean, I don't know if you like, how would you even do that? Because Alan and I were looking at gels on the weekend, and they are like 21 to 25 grams.
Yeah.
I mean, and 25, that's not the goos. The goos are definitely 21.
Right.
You got to take 3 gels an hour. So if you're running a 3-hour marathon, you should be taking 9 gels.
9 gels.
So most people will not do that, because you can agree or disagree with my next statement. Gels are not that tasty. And if someone likes them and loves them, then go for it. More power to you. I don't usually recommend doing it all from gels. People get sick of them. They don't tend to follow through with that. And you're not getting...
An interesting thing with gels is at the start of a marathon, they're not really that tasty, but they're not too bad. But by the end of a marathon, they're absolutely horrendous, and you can't possibly keep it in your stomach.
Right. You know, that could go either way, Alan. Actually, some people will say they taste better and better as they go.
Really? Oh.
Because they're getting more depleted and they need them. And other people, it's, oh my gosh, I can't look at this.
I'm going to barf.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not advantageous.
Second category. Yeah.
Right. So the first is always know yourself, right? So do I tend to go out too fast or too slow? Very important thing to know. Get a training partner who does the opposite if you want to run a good marathon. If you both go out too fast, good luck. You know, it's probably not going to go well. So know which end you're on and get there. To answer both of those questions, most marathoners are not going to aim for over 60 grams of carbs per hour. So 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour is the range that you'll see everywhere. And where I would encourage people is, again, to think you didn't wake up able to run 26.2 miles, and don't expect to go out your first time and be able to take 60 grams of carbs an hour while running. That's an unrealistic expectation. It will take training. You have to train your gut just the way you train your other muscles. And when we think of it that way, it makes more sense. So instead of some people saying, well, I just can't eat breakfast and I can't fuel during, that's not true. You just can't do it today. So we start small and fuel up. Most marathoners will not take in over 60 grams. So 40, 50, 60. I think where I try to really encourage people is to take in as much as they can tolerate and absorb, because you will perform better. So if you think about some of the athlete stories, I interviewed 26 amazing, phenomenal, beautiful people and athletes in that book, and all of the endurance runners. And I did not interview other people and cut them out because they said the wrong thing. That's not the way this works. We interviewed and it went in, and it was all supposed to be truth and trials and tribulation. And all of their stories, you know, you hear Dina Castor, which, what an amazing runner, longevity in career, someone we can all look up to and say, well, she's probably in tune with her body. You know, she talks about, oh, she was taking some and she was not feeling as good as she thought she should, like you're saying, fading towards the end. So she added a little bit more carb. And that's pretty common, and trying to then get to a place where you can take 50 to 60 grams of carbs per hour during a marathon. We're going to get to those higher numbers, maybe in ultra marathons, half and full Ironman triathlon, where there's also a bike segment and we're sitting instead of jumping up and down while we're running. So if you can get to 50 to 60 grams an hour, Liz and Alan, while you're running, you are doing an amazing job and you should feel great.
Okay, so put that on our training schedule, Liz.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to train.
Noted.
I'm gonna have to get sponsored by a gel supplier or something that's increased my gel intake by 2 or 3 times.
You definitely have to practice, but I mean, I would encourage you to practice with sports drinks too, because you really need fluid, right? It's not a good idea to run a marathon without drinking anything. So if you're going to drink something, you might as well get carbs and sodium along with it, because sodium is key to performance, and making sure we maintain our electrolyte balance is absolutely imperative in endurance sports. So you might as well get used to drinking some sports drinks, ideally the one being served on the course, now that we're getting back to races with people and courses. This is exciting, because you need that fluid anyway.
Yeah. And sometimes it's easier to drink than it is to, choke down that sticky gel that half of it dribbles all over your fingers. So
Right.
I guess the next topic of conversation, now that we're all thinking, oh my goodness, I have to eat so many carbs and protein, but if I get this down, I should be on my way to being a better athlete, because I'm going to be fueling my runs properly. And then you have a chapter about fats and that they're important as well. So why would fats be important? Especially,
I mean, I think it's so funny, some people come in, as you're saying, oh my goodness, I have to get all of this stuff in, and others are, yay, let me rejoice, I get to eat all these carbs that I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. So it's always so interesting to hear.
Yeah.
And different people are probably on different sides of that coin.
My game plans, my little hamster is running on the wheel here in my head, and my game plan's kind of working like this at the moment. Okay, Lauren's just told me that I need to eat quite a bit more protein probably to keep my strength up.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got to eat mostly carbs to fuel my runs, and the percentage of carbs has to stay the same, but the level of protein's gone up. So I've got to have overall more stuff to eat. That's okay. I'm a light guy. I'm doing a lot of miles. But my stomach's not trained to take that in. Haha, snacks, second breakfast. Now I'm going to think about, okay, have some more protein, probably have the same percentage of carbohydrates. So I'm still having probably a little bit more in terms of carb fueling. And then I'm going to split it into more portions, or some meals and some snacks. So some big meals and some small meals, let's call it. And maybe I'm going to have 5 or 6 visits to the eating process during the day. That's kind of what this is my game plan now for this successful 3-hour marathon.
It sounds like a good game plan.
I may end up just on the couch in front of the TV, but I'm hoping it's going to get me into. And now we have fats.
Well, yeah. So just piggybacking off of what you just said, I think the way you just thought that through and thinking it through. So actually, if anyone's trying to make changes in their life, they should probably start a podcast with a friend, because when we talk out loud to each other, we think things through and come up with great ideas rather than thinking it through in my head by myself, when we say it and hear it. So this is probably great. I love the way you thought that through. Now, someone else might be saying, okay, I heard Alan, he said he's a light guy, he can eat more, and they don't feel like they're in that boat. They're not feeling like a person who can stand to eat more. Then I would say that maybe their percentage of carbs is going to come down a little bit, and that may be okay. So we need to fit in that protein. That's absolutely imperative. We're going to talk about fats in a second. It really just depends. Like the percentage of carbs that I was eating in college, I have no idea because I never counted. It must have been a crazy percentage. I had room to come down to make room for my protein, and that's fine, right? So I see some runners, and maybe they're my age from when we all just ate carbs all the time, or for whatever reason, they trained with the Kenyans who eat 75% carbs in those early marathoning days, and they're eating that much, and they can probably get by with 70% carbs and make more room for protein, right? So everyone's balance is going to be different. You want to move on to fats?
Yes. Now I want to see how the fats fit in, because I'm thinking that, okay, that sounds great. It's already a lot of food, but okay, let's say that Alan just broke it down for me, and I'm gonna put it into little meals. And usually, so just as an aside, I did this carbo loading protocol for like the last marathon I did in 2019. And it's a friend of mine that had followed it. And she said, it's 3 days and you try and eat 10 grams per kilogram of body weight in terms of like number of grams of carbs per day
There's
for
a
the 3
lot.
days. And it was really a lot, but she said the key is to limit your fat and your fiber. And I mean, your protein, you're going to get some anyway, just because you're eating so much food and everything has a little bit of protein in it. So that was my strategy. But now you're telling me I cannot use that strategy because I need fat. So why is the fat important?
Okay, so this is the fun part. So I'm going to say, if we want to get to that topic, we're going to put a pin in it and fast forward 10 minutes and get to it. Those 3 days before the race, you don't need a lot of fat. We're going to talk about what fat's good for. The last 3 days before a race, do you need a ton of protein? No, you shouldn't be recovering from anything crazy. You should be tapering. There should be no 18-mile run. There should be no 2-hour strength session. There should be short stuff. So this is not high protein requiring activity. And you don't need that much protein in those 2 or 3 days before. You don't need as much fat in those days before. Also, the carbo loading research in women is shaky to minimal, and we just don't carbo load the same way. So maybe you don't need to do that anyway. But we do need to eat more carbs or enough carbs, but maybe not that old school, starting in the 70s protocol of super depletion and super compensation. So
yeah, I
you may
didn't
not
do
need
the
to do that.
depletion part. I just did the 3 days because apparently my friend said that that the depletion part was not necessary, didn't give any better results or something. So
Right.
and I read that somewhere else too. So I don't know,
Good.
but I would like to hear your opinion on that. I just did the 3 days, 10 grams per kilogram of body weight, or at least I tried. I got
You tried.
very close. The first day I was bang on. The second day I was full from the first day. I mean,
You're burning out. It is really high. Sometimes in sports nutrition, we come up with these numbers and then we look at it and we say, okay, that's not realistic. If I'm looking at, let's say, soccer players playing 2 or 3 games a day for 3 days in a row, and I calculate their carb needs, I'm like, this isn't going to work. They're not going to eat this. And then you make your best adjustments in terms of, okay, where's our non-negotiable before and after and this, and then we can cut a corner here because they have to fall asleep, or, in those long ultra runs, same thing, right? You're trying to get through, but you also need a nap in between. So those are kind of a different situation. So in terms of the fats and why I said we don't really need many fats the 3 days before, is they're still important for overall life, and they're important for hormone production. They're important for absorption of fat soluble vitamins, so vitamins A and D and E and K, and there's no quiz on this, on which vitamins, but those are them. Immune function and decreasing inflammation. So this past year plus, immune function has been a hot topic, and it should be, and it should always be, because immunity is important. And as runners, when we do crazy things like run a marathon, studies show that up to 40% of people complete the marathon and get an upper respiratory infection in the next week. So our immune systems are down. So those good fats are really great. We need them every day, a few times a day. We have to make room for them. It's kind of like your running sneakers in the suitcase when you're going away. It doesn't matter how small that suitcase is. My running sneakers have to fit, right? Like this, they have to fit. So we have to make room. And I often talk about nutrition like packing a suitcase, because everyone has packed a suitcase. And maybe there are some people on this planet that this hasn't happened to, but they've seen it happen to somewhere else. You're trying to shove way too much stuff in that suitcase and you can't close it, and it's not going to work. And some stuff has to get moved around. So nutrition can be the same, right? So we're kind of jiggling things around to see, well, the running sneakers are non-negotiable. They're kind of big, but they're going in. And then what else
So
fits?
that's the protein. The protein is like the running sneakers.
Yeah. I think in your book, you give the analogy of getting dressed each day.
Yeah, I do that too.
You're getting dressed each day, and
you
can't wear like 5 pairs of underpants and no shirt. That doesn't really work. You've got to have like a selection of everything. 2 shoes, a right shoe and a left shoe, a top and a bottom.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think the longer I've been doing this, the more bizarre my analogies get, but the more bizarre the analogy gets, the more likely someone is to remember it and do something about it. So pick whichever article of clothing you can't live without. And if anyone's listening to this with a non-running friend, they can pick the thing in their suitcase they would never travel without. It could be whatever they want, but the point is the same. So in terms of the fats, I think as we get older, and I've been asked this question a lot after people read the book, they said, do we need more fat as we get older? And we don't really need more fat as we get older, but it becomes more important that we eat enough fat. So like everything, think like stretching. When I was 20, did I stretch? No. Maybe for 5 seconds, I thought I was stretching. I was really just standing there talking with my foot up on the fence. You know, at 46, do I stretch and foam roll every time I run? 100%, right? And I think of every coach or PT that's ever told me, and I'm like, look, I'm still doing this, and thank you. So the fats become kind of like that, one of those things that we can't get away with not eating anymore, and we shouldn't have been ever, but you know, if we're remiss in something when we're 20, 25, our bodies are very resilient. As we get older, we really start to need and rely on those anti-inflammatory fats more. So these are, as you and probably a lot of the people listening will know, but just to make sure, things like our avocados and the delicious guacamole and hummus and olives and all of our wonderful nuts and all of our seeds and nut butters, all of those good fats, fatty fish. So those are super important, and we need to find a way to work those into our diet a few times every day. So here's where it sort of sounds like a lot. And I know I hear you saying, wow, this sounds like a lot. And I get that a lot. But most people like to eat. And it's just a question of kind of reorganizing your suitcase or figuring out, oh, I really want to make room for the avocados and olives on my sandwich or in my salad. So maybe then you're not going to be hungry later for that third granola bar or the second handful of goldfish that your kids are eating, or that random snack tray at work that we haven't been at work, but when we go back to work, there may be a random snack tray with donuts, which is fine when I want a donut, but not every day because I just didn't put avocado on my sandwich. So I kind of think of it that way.
Okay, that's great. So basically, before we eat a donut, we should think to see which food we forgot to eat earlier in the day and eat that first. And then if we're still hungry, we can have the donut.
Unless you really are passing by your favorite donut place and you don't go there often, then just forget it and go in and enjoy the beautiful homemade donut. Or for me, it would be my favorite homemade ice cream place would be my thing. Then maybe I'm not asking myself any questions because I only go by here every once in a while. And every time I do, whichever is once a month or once a week, I always get the ice cream cone, right? But if it's a normal daily thing of every night after dinner, I'm eating this cereal and then that thing and then that thing, or an apple and a pear and a banana and a yogurt, it's like, wait, this doesn't feel right. I must be missing something earlier in the day is what I want people to think about, instead of what's wrong with me? Why am I eating all this food? This is terrible. I shouldn't be doing this. That's not productive. Instead, we go to, okay, what is productive? What did I miss earlier in the day? Let me play that podcast again and see how they talked about that. Oh, right. I didn't put any avocado or hummus or nuts in my lunch, right? Or my dinner, or I missed my snack, and just really filling in with the good stuff and then going for those just fun extras when you want them, or I happen to be here and this is the best place.
I guess
That sounds like my
sort of view is, you know, if I want to have a donut with bacon inside it and wash it down with a couple of beers, and I really want to do that, then I'll kind of go for it. But what I won't do is I'll try not to build a habit around that. So like treats are good, and you shouldn't deprive yourself. And if you like something, eat it.
Yes.
Don't build a habit around it where you're eating it every morning or you're eating it every day. You're eating it every lunchtime. Yeah.
So now you're going into the way our brains work and conditioning, right?
We need a psychobiologist to tell us about it.
I think the easiest way, and again, most things have changed this past year, but everyone has been to a movie at some point, however long ago it was, maybe a while. And what does everyone think when they go to the movies? We have to get popcorn. Why? We were conditioned by the people who want to sell the popcorn, and it's fine, or by the grandparents or parents who bought it for us every time we went when we were a kid. Do I ever ask myself if I want popcorn? No, I smell it. I go to the movies. It's an assumption. So it's a learned association habit. Exactly what you're saying. The more of those we have, the harder things get. Because if I have a habit that I eat a donut with my coffee every morning, and there's no way in heck I'm giving up my coffee, now I'm stuck with the donut every day. And I'm not asking myself if I want a donut or if I should have eggs and toast and fruit because I just finished a run. The two habits are stacked together. So I think that whether you realized it or not, that is an absolutely fantastic trap to avoid, right? So then you can really listen to, hey, that's a weird combination, but I like it. And I don't have it associated with every time I see my friend Jose, I do it. And then when I see Sally, we eat donuts. And then
You mentioned another one of my favorite nutritional intakes there, which we haven't touched on, coffee and caffeine. I was positively enthused to read that caffeine is now not bad for you, and it's approved by WADA or accepted by WADA. So not only is it not a doping offense, but it's actually not bad for you anymore.
It's great when science aligns with what people want. I don't make up the science, but when we get to, parse through the information, everyone is always happy about that. Although I did receive a few emails from people I know or don't know saying, I'm the odd man or woman out. I'm 46 years old, have never had a cup of coffee in my life, but it's an ergogenic aid. I think I should start trying it before my races. What do you recommend? So I think that point hit home to all the habitual caffeine users, which is a much larger percentage of our population. They're just happy that they're not doing themselves any harm. But caffeine's an ergogenic aid. And, until the point at which you consume too much that it's interfering, causing migraines, causing GI upset, making your heart rate too fast, making you jittery and anxious, those are obvious signs you've overdone it. Everyone's tolerance will be different. The person who hasn't had a cup of coffee in 46 years, her tolerance is lower. My husband was brought up drinking coffee in his milk when he was 5, so he says. His tolerance is pretty good at this point for coffee. So just as long as you don't go above those limits, you're okay.
That's great.
Will the benefits that you get from caffeine reduce if you're habituated to caffeine, or do you get the benefits anyway?
Right. There's a little bit of I don't want to say bad news exactly, but yes, of course, there's a habituation like all things. So a non-caffeine consumer will wake up in the morning feeling like their normal self. And if you bring people to a lab and you separate them, caffeine and non-caffeine consumers, the people that don't consume caffeine walk into the lab for whatever it is they think they're doing, and no one's allowed to eat or drink before, and they're fine. They're in a good mood. The habitual caffeine consumers are feeling very tired, maybe grumpy, maybe not so happy. So they've lowered their baseline such that they need caffeine to function at a normal baseline of alertness. Your body does downregulate. That is the function of most of these, I'm going to say addictive, but substances that we put in our body. So yes, that does happen. And we need to be careful with that because there's only so high you can go before it starts to, okay, I've had my 2 cups, the 3rd cup's just going to make me jittery. If that's the case, someone's going to need to scale back for a bit, let's say before a big race where they want the caffeine to really count. Don't go cold turkey. If you're a habitual user, you will be miserable and hate yourself and me for thinking I recommended it, but I'm not. You just got to cut back slowly. So if you're drinking 6 cups a day, tomorrow you go to 5 and you do that for 3 to 5 days. And the next day you go to 4. And if your race is however far in the future, maybe you should get down from 6 cups. That probably long-term is not ideal for bones and other reasons, but then you'll feel the effect more.
So the good news is that there aren't very many supplements listed in your book that actually have proven performance enhancement benefits. So caffeine is one of them, but from what I understand, like just eating enough and having enough carbs and protein probably have a better effect than any of the supplements you listed. I don't know if you really want to touch on any of the supplements that do have, performance enhancing benefits.
Well, first, I just want to say heck yes, and thank you for figuring that out. I mean, I have athletes come in all the time. Will this, that, and the other supplement or vitamin help? And it's like, okay, great questions. Let's write them down over here. And let's first look at what you're taking in every day. And if you're taking in 40 grams of protein and you need 80, we have to do that first. If you're not taking enough carbs after the workout or during the workout, we have to do that first. If you're not hydrating during your day or workout, all of those things will make an exponentially bigger difference than any supplement. And I think it almost gets annoying writing and reading about supplements because at the bottom, you always have to say, almost always, there are responders and non-responders. Some people respond, some don't. Some people will feel terrible, and more is not better, right? And more research might be needed. So there's always that caveat. And then there's the huge topic, which just to quickly scratch the surface, is that many supplements are not regulated. So you don't always know what you're going to get. Yet, if someone is going to be drug tested at any point, the fact that you don't know what's in it has nothing to do with the fact that you are responsible for what you have put in your body. So buyer beware, athlete beware. We're much better off using all of the real nutrition tricks, tips. Those are going to make a much bigger difference. So you're right. I mean, did you have a specific supplement? We went through, I think in the book, I went through the 4 or 5 that have actually shown any benefit in terms of performance. And even so, it's not clear cut and it's not for everyone. And sometimes they're really small, right? And then I did a few on sleep, just because sleep is so important and such a hot topic. And people take melatonin all the time. And I don't really think the research supports that, but there are a few others that might be worth trying. So did you have a specific one so I don't just babble on for 20 minutes about supplements?
I mean, I know that that one that's kind of popular now, and sometimes is even included in some of those pre-workout formulations, is like beets or nitrates. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to talk about, because that was one of the ones that might have some performance enhancement benefits, and
right.
because caffeine, I think, was the most the one that really shows performance enhancement benefits, but we already kind of talked about caffeine. So other than that, there's the beet juice, because you also talk about beta alanine, but it seems like it's more for like short race athletes. So
Right.
like
Yeah,
not sprinters, but middle
bicarbonate as well.
distance maybe. Yeah, bicarbonate too seems to be something that's that
Bicarbonate's an interesting one. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, they're all interesting, but again, I think it's always a question of, do the benefits outweigh, or do we have unknown possible side effects, or even one like tart cherry, which is not what you asked about. So now I asked you to pick one, but I'm going in a different direction. We see really good research because we have some data in runners. We have data in runners that have run marathons, and we have data in runners that have done those, I'm going to say, like hood to coast, multiple day relays, which I don't know if you've done them, super fun, ridiculously exhausting on the body. Your legs are dead, worse than any marathon ever. At least that's been my experience. So really solid research, let's say, in taking tart cherry juice 3 to 5 days before and after a marathon, or those big, huge muscle recovery events. But then there's also some good research showing that we don't want to be taking those every day because they blunt the natural inflammatory and physiological response of training. So that's just where we get into the nuance of, there's always the case of, we're about to find out something else in a year or 5 or 10. Now you've been taking this thing, and oh well, you move on from there. So I think, when we read the research and the studies, if you're interested, read a whole bunch, read some reviews, read them very critically. If you're not, let someone else do it, and then, go ahead and read theirs and just make sure they vetted and know how to read a study and are good on that. But so you said, in terms of which ones, I mean, the beta alanine, that's what you asked about, really short stuff. So 1 minute, 4 minute, 10 minute, maybe. So that could be some runners. As masters athletes, more of us do longer stuff that lasts longer than 10 minutes. 10 minutes, we've got.
What about beet juice?
Beet juice. So the beetroot juice has some good
Nitrates.
research. Sorry?
I thought it was the nitrates in beet juice. Is that what it is?
Yeah. I think I was in a conference, I can't remember when the first beet juice research was being presented, and it was this whole new breakthrough. But then when you think, I don't know, we've been talking about how beets I don't remember in college, beets were oxygenating. I don't know what that means. Was that because they increased our oxygen? Is it because they're red and they look like the right color? But there was some truth to that. I just remember in college talking about it. We also thought Coca-Cola was deoxygenating, and I don't know where we got that from. Of course, it's not good for a bunch of things, but some of those random things, there's wives' tale, and some there was truth too. So there has been really good research on the nitrates and the buffering agents. So those can be beneficial. And I think one thing to think about is, if we're looking at beetroot juice, it does come from a pretty potent antioxidant rich plant source, and plants are not all benign, and plants are not all without side effects, and especially when you pulverize them and stick them into a supplement. But this is a good case, looking in terms of, let's say, postponing fatigue and delayed onset muscle soreness. There's some pretty good research behind it. So that could be worth a try. And it's decently low risk. I think, again, always look at the risk, cost to risk benefit or analysis there to see whether it's worth trying for an individual. But yes, 100%, please get in your carbs, protein, fat, fluid, all of that first before you, that's not going to fix, oh, I take beetroot juice and L-theanine to sleep and I don't eat enough protein and I don't eat breakfast for 4 hours after my training. They won't do you any good.
I moved to Canada from Australia, so this is a sharp contrast for me, because I found that in Canada everybody talks about vitamin D supplements all the time. Oh, you should take a vitamin D supplement. Why? Well, in winter there's not that much sunlight. The days are
different
short.
Hemisphere.
You're near the North Pole, relatively speaking.
Correct.
The days are shorter, and you don't get the sunlight effect, which generates the vitamin D. So you should take a supplement. Is this an old wives' tale, or is this true and good science?
No, you either have to move back towards the equator, or you probably have to take a supplement from, depending on the latitude. You guys are a little higher than I am, but here in New York, I say, like, pick a date. If it's easy to remember things, I would say from Halloween to Memorial Day, because it's close enough and easy to remember. You start taking vitamin D. It's good to get all labs checked. I mean, while we're on that topic, I'd say for everyone, I'm a fan of getting labs checked and knowing where you are instead of closing your eyes and 5 years later finding out there's a problem. But for athletes, really, getting iron and ferritin checked and vitamin D and getting cortisol levels checked and hormone levels checked, and just having a really good sense of where all those things are. Lipids are super important, especially as we get older. I'll say the word, just because you can feel fine and not know that something is creeping up. But vitamin D, I don't know what the Canadian recommendation is, but here we say the normal or ideal range would be 30 to 50. Now, you really want your vitamin D level closer up to 50. And many people, when they come to me, that bring their labs and their vitamin D was something not anywhere near 50, like 10 or 20 or maybe 25 or,
wow.
And so we want to optimize those. And there are all kinds of reasons in terms of immunity and blood sugar and bone health, of course. And so it's simple enough. Pop a little vitamin D. The nice thing about vitamin D is it's not really picky. I say that like I'm personifying the vitamin, but the absorption is pretty forgiving. So if I forgot to take it for 3 days and I take 3 of them on one day, that's okay. That's not the case with most things. You don't want to do that with iron or calcium. No. With vitamin D, you can. So some people say, I only remember on Saturdays. Okay, so take more on Saturdays.
So it doesn't have a very restrictive absorption system like iron does, for example.
Correct.
My family doctor had prescribed me that high dose that you can take once a week, but I kept forgetting to take it. So I just switched to the one I was.
You have to remember it at some point. Otherwise it will not work.
Exactly. So I feel like once a week, like not good for me. I prefer the daily one because then it's like a habit, Well,
that's what we were talking about before with the donut. Here we do want a habit stack. So you say, coming back from a run is actually a great time to take that vitamin D. So it's something you can leave in a place that when you come back from your run, you will see it. Or if not, some other time of day, you can leave it next to your toothbrush. Like just leave it somewhere and stack it onto another habit that you will probably remember. And just stick it on there, because you're right. Some people once a week, it's like, well, which day of the week did I remember it this week? Oh, forget it. Just take it every day.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, Friday. Oh, but did I take it on Friday? Because now I don't remember because we're Sunday and like 2 days have passed. And, if you can't even remember what you had for breakfast, how are you going to remember if you took your vitamin D on Friday?
Right. Consistency can really help. So for sure.
Could I ask you a couple of questions about specifically about diets?
Oh, like the 4-letter word diet.
Types of diets. Yeah.
Mhm.
One of our running buddies and an avid listener, Christoph, he seems to be quite into intermittent fasting at the moment. So he said, "Oh, you're talking to somebody about nutrition on your podcast. Ask them about intermittent fasting for weight loss. Are there benefits to that or not?"
So since you know this person, I'm going to ask a question that I feel like the answer might be obvious, but let's just say this person is a runner. This is an active individual, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of stuff always begets controversy, but I'm ready for it. Because we all like what we like and we don't like to be told, we can argue about the best shoes. Nobody's right, but we're each going to be super adamant that our shoes are definitely the best, or whatever else you want. In terms of this, again, I think it's a really important. So we've talked about science so much in the past, let's say 14 months during this pandemic, right? And the really important part is not just to talk about science, but to read the science really well and look at what they studied. So in terms of reading science for athletes, there's a little side, and then we'll go back to this. Like one of the big things when I was at Berkeley for grad school, they talked about the Stanford swimmers, and everyone knows the Stanford swimmers are amazing. So whatever they're doing is top notch. And they went to a high fat diet. And if they went to a high fat diet, they burned more fat. So they had higher fat oxidation. And this sounds amazing because it probably, we can surmise, increases the amount of fat they burn and therefore would do all of these cascading things. The problem is I won't even go into the cascading things because by the time we get to the end result, they didn't swim any faster. They didn't feel any better. And if we took it too high, their mood tanked and their high-end performance tanked because we lost the carbs. So therefore, the science is no longer important to discuss because that little increase in fat oxidation led to other repercussions and not a performance advantage, right?
Is that more keto when you were saying about high? Because that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, of course, we can go there. It starts to lean towards that. Like it's all this is what I studied out at Berkeley. It's substrate utilization. So what are you burning? Are you burning fat or carbs or protein? All of us sitting here, assuming neither of you are riding a bicycle that I can't see while we're talking, we're burning a higher percentage of fat because we're just sitting here, right?
Yeah, Liz has actually changed her seat. Normally she would be burning some calories. She sits on one of those Bosu balls.
Oh, yes.
So when you're talking with her, you can't see
She's
this if you're
around.
a listener, but you see Liz doing this, bouncing up and down while she's on the video, and everyone else who's on the video call gets seasick because you see Liz bouncing up and down on the Bosu ball.
Oh my gosh. Super funny. So the intermittent fasting studies, a lot of them were done in sedentary, overweight men. So probably not your demographic. And I think most of what we find is that the benefits that people are looking for in terms of decreasing inflammation or longevity or weight loss in the intermittent fasting, we can see those same benefits if we just engage in sport and decide to go train. So we're going to see those benefits anyway. And then if you add the intermittent fasting on top, it either doesn't add any benefit, or I see many detriments to the intermittent fasting. And watch, you'll see my brain, how it works. Instead of this goes back to how do we fit all this stuff in? How are you supposed to fit in all these great carbs? We didn't even really talk about, because hopefully it's obvious that we need plenty of fruits and vegetables and all these grains and nuts and seeds. We've got to fit in the protein. We've got to fit in how am I supposed to do that? Plus run, plus do anything else productive in this tiny little window. So there's a much bigger chance that we're going to miss out. Masters athletes, we have to eat protein 4 times a day. They have to be a couple hours apart. I'm already running out of time. So the intermittent fasting, I think, doesn't show huge benefit in athletes, and there are a lot of detriments in terms of going out for long runs, fasted and then not fueled and losing high end intensity, or not recovering as well. So it's not really an advantage, especially for masters athletes.
Okay. Okay, that sums it up well, because you also, yeah, you also mentioned, because the other thing he was kind of curious about was all those other benefits people always talk about, like a better immunity, but you
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, we've
mentioned
already
that
got
that's
that.
more in sedentary people. So I guess
Uh-huh.
this would be a great time to discuss the opposite side of the spectrum, which we kind of discussed in having a tiny window to eat. You're not getting enough fuel in that tiny window.
Yeah.
So like what the consequences, and I guess you can also describe what red S is, which is relative energy deficiency in sport, which I think
Yeah.
a lot of listeners probably hear a lot about. Like in recent years, it's come up a lot with the Mary Kane story and all that kind of stuff. But what are the consequences of underfueling? Because it's a surprisingly long list.
It is a surprisingly long list, and without going through the whole list and putting anybody to sleep, I think it's suffice it to say that red S is relative energy deficiency in sport. And I think it's a much better term. I had nothing to do with creating it. It's just, I can say, oh, I like it. Just like I like the My Plate better than the pyramid. It works because it helps, first of all, ask a question of what is red S? And the original term that we were using, what we had available to us, was the female athlete triad. Now that's a problem for so many reasons. It only includes female, which is not fair to the rest of the world because they can be underfueled. And it only involves 3 systems in our body, which neglects to represent everything else. So relative energy deficiency in sport, say that 3 times fast, is a state where, for whatever reason, someone is not consuming enough calories to meet their needs of their normal basal metabolic rate, normal life, oxygen functioning, plus daily living. Maybe you have to walk to get somewhere, or you're walking the dog or playing with kids or something, carrying your groceries, and then your activity for sport. So if you're not eating enough to maintain all of that, we start getting into a deficit. And I think the whole concept of calories and caloric deficit sometimes almost has a positive spin, like, oh, it could be good to be in a deficit. But we really need to get away from that, because in thinking of long-term deficit, well, if there's a deficit, what am I missing? Well, I'm missing key things that will really impact my bone health, my hormone health, my cardiovascular health, GI health. As you said, the list is long. Mood. So we see anxiety and depression. We see irritability. In females, we have an outward sign when females stop menstruating. It's really often, most often, a sign that they're just not eating enough and that their body is conserving energy by slowing and shutting down reproductive activity. Men, it's obviously not so obvious because they don't have such a monthly, obvious sign of hormonal and reproductive health. So in women, we have, I will call it, the benefit of seeing that. So anytime we see that a female athlete of menstruation age, should be menstruating, maybe they already started, is what we call amenorrheic, so they're not menstruating anymore. We really need to be examining why. And back in the day, when I was in high school and college, it was thought, oh, if you run too much, maybe the doctors or coaches would even say, if you run too much, you don't get your period, it's fine. That is not fine. That is never fine. So really getting that ingrained in the culture throughout running and sport of that is never fine. That is never a great sign. Either there's a medical thing going on that we need to figure out, or more times than not, that person is underfueled. Then we can get into why they're underfueled, and the why will get us to how difficult it is to fix that underfueling deficit, but it is an underfueling state. And then, of course, the biggest thing, what do we see? Why do we find out that someone has amenorrhea? It's not because they walk around talking about it, although that would be great if they started telling friends and coaches and people said, hey, that's no good. Just like high blood pressure is no good. Get it checked out. Often, unfortunately, it's when they get their first or second or third stress fracture. And so I'll see a lot of people in my office, and I work with a lot of amazing physicians in New York, And we work with a lot of athletes that have had stress fractures because when we're not menstruating and our body is trying to conserve, we start to really see bone loss, and you don't get that bone back. So that's a big loss.
Okay.
It would seem to me that, you need to think a little bit about your nutritional game plan, but it would seem to me also that you should guard against thinking about it too much, because you can kind of overdo these things, and we see that there are even conditions now. What's it?
Orthorexia. 100%. Yes.
Conditions where you're too obsessive. Liz is smiling because
Alan
sometimes
loves to
refer to
highlight this.
Liz, you're getting a bit orthorexic here. Tone it down, girl. But there's a balance point where the Alan approach, which is, where's the food? Is it decent food? Eat quite a bit of it and do quite a bit of training.
Yes.
Is kind of not that bad, and but you got to think about it a bit more. And the Liz bit, which is maybe thinking about, what does this rapper say? What does this rapper say? What does this? These are not
This
very.
have enough protein in
these
it.
are not very healthy. These, you got to meet in the middle somewhere. So all of that's milling around in my head, and the question comes out at, would you have any, for our listeners, would you have any general comments in terms of things that, in your experience, people should generally look out for, or people should generally try to do, or like words of advice or words of warning?
That's a great question and a super important point. So I will say, as a sports dietitian, it would be surprised. Maybe you'd be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't. What people think I eat or don't think, or how people think I will react when they say, "Oh, I ate a donut." Like, people think they're going to tell me they ate a donut, and I'm going to say something terrible. My least favorite thing to hear, the thing that makes me the most concerned, is when someone makes a statement like, "I'm a runner. I eat super healthy. I even only eat strawberries for dessert on my birthday." That's a concern to me, because why would it be valued? Why would it be something that we should look up to or need to do to say, I only eat strawberries on my birthday? Because you know what? Ice creams are good, and cake is good, and donuts are good. And does ice cream make me a better runner? I guess not, but it makes me a happier, healthier person. It also makes it easier for me to eat enough to meet my needs. And it also frees up a lot of time and space in my brain to think about other things, so I'm not obsessing about food. It's the other reason why I don't ever like and won't let anyone in my life use the word clean around food. Clean can be for floors or sneakers or clothing, but not for food. So that whole concept, I think it was well-meaning in the beginning, but now we've labeled clean and dirty. It's like, my running shirt is clean, I'll wear it. It's dirty, ew, it smells, go away. That food shouldn't be judged like that. So I think really thinking about, when would I be concerned, or what are red flags? If someone is really going to have a lot of anxiety, or have to really think long and hard about, should I go to this birthday party because there'll be cake? Or, what am I going to do on my birthday? I don't want to have to eat the cake. Or, oh, well, I'm not like that, but I'll go to the party, but I will never eat the cake at the party because it's bad and I don't trust myself, or I'll feel guilty. Those are kinds of things that we want to take away and offload so that we don't have those feelings. Food should be fun. You should be able to you're going to choose your donut with bacon and beer. I'm going to choose an ice cream cone with something else, but we're all fine. And then the next day we're going to have oatmeal for breakfast and eggs somewhere else and avocado toast and this lovely, beautiful burger for dinner, and everything is fine. So I think the balance is really important. If someone is really struggling to increase their variety or make any changes, feels really rigid, we have to eat the same foods all the time, or really assigning a virtue to the food or the person eating the food, like, oh, I was really good today because I ate this food, and I was bad today because I ate that food. I would say all of those are on a continuum of, hey, we can examine that more, and you can free up some time and space and get rid of some anxiety in your life if we include some of these foods. And at first, when I work with clients, I was like, I don't understand why you think it's a big deal if I haven't eaten a piece of cake in 5 years. And then as we work together for a little while longer, and maybe we've introduced avocado, and then we've introduced a piece of bread, and they're like, you know what, Lauren, I finally understand what the big deal is with you. saying we all have to eat a piece of cake or ice cream every once in a while, because it just represents, okay, this food doesn't control me. The food doesn't control my life. It's not true that runners don't eat cake. It's not true that runners don't do any particular thing. And having that freedom to listen to our body and say, you know what, I don't know why, but today I'm really hungry, so I'm going to eat more. That's much more powerful and important than saying, my meal plan says this, or I only eat this. I'm going to be hungry for 3 hours. That's not good for recovery or productivity or anything.
Good point.
I could go on about that topic for a very long time. That'll be the next.
And that's very clear in your book when you interview all the athletes, often very high caliber athletes, and you say, "What's your favorite food?" And they say, "Oh, I like to have a big plate of French fries after a training session or something."
Yeah.
Or pizza.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And those who struggled with versions of eating disorders or orthorexia, and there are a few examples of that from grateful humans who, again, I appreciate their sharing their amazing story. I mean, from Ellen Hart, who is an absolutely phenomenal athlete and human and really was forthcoming. I think if anyone wonders whether they're struggling with or have ever struggled with an eating disorder, and they read a recount such as that of the way Ellen describes her eating disorder and how it happened and how she felt, if those things start to really resonate with a person, there's a reason. And then know that unlike when Ellen was going through her bulimia, there are so many resources now. Like, she was trying to get help and she couldn't. And now there are so many dietitians and mental health professionals, therapists that do this all the time, that you can seek help and get a great team. And it's work, but again, we're runners. We sign up for a marathon and other things, and we work on that. So all good things may require work, and that's for sure worth it.
Especially if it gets you a sub 3-hour marathon.
Well, you're not going to be able to PR, perform your best, or be an athlete for a really long time if you're underfueled, because we start to fall apart. I mean, I think, the easiest quote is a 7 times higher injury rate. Of course, that varies among people and, situations, but that doesn't sound good. And, I really like to think of longevity in sport. I mean, I'm a person who, if you're 22 and you beat me, so be it. If you're older than me and you beat me, I'm motivated and inspired and saying, that's the most awesome thing. I don't care. Pass me. I mean, I'm going to go faster maybe to challenge myself, but that's an inspiration. So that's something I think we can all look to say, or even not, I'm passing someone and they're 80, but they're still running, also an inspiration, something I'd love to be able to continue doing. And I think most of us fall into that camp because running brings us so much that to let the food piece undermine that is such a shame.
Yeah, as I said, I think I'm looking to just add a bit and optimize and actually have the food support me better than it currently is. So
awesome.
Gratefully, I don't have that issue on that end. And if I go too crazy, Liz will keep me straight. And if she goes too orthorexic, I'll lighten her up a bit. So we're a good team we're a good nutritional team.
Yeah.
It's good. Again, it's good to have a team, and hopefully we're getting back to being able to see more of our team in person for many reasons. So that will be a very welcome reprieve for us all.
We're going to do a little summary of just our take homes from the book. But before we do that, maybe you could tell us where if people want to find out more or get your book, find out what else you have to offer, where can they catch up with you, Lauren?
Sure, thanks. So my book is called High Performance Nutrition for Masters Athletes, long title, but explains it. It's available directly from the publisher, which is Human Kinetics. So to go to the Human Kinetics website, there's a link to buy the book. There's also, I did a free webinar with Human Kinetics a week ago, and it is free to anyone who goes online and registers. You put your email in through Human Kinetics, and you can watch that, and it gives you an hour of me doing a presentation about the book. So they might find that interesting. It is, of course, also available on Amazon. My website is the name of my practice, which is Nutrition Energy. So nutritionenergy.com. And then I am on Instagram, the same handle, @Nutrition Energy. My Instagram is I don't want to say a random assortment of me doing running things, fueling and running and fueling and activity with our kids to kind of just highlight the real life of
The
it all.
normality of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. So what I would say about Lauren's book is it takes out all the fluffy opinions, because it states the scientific references for almost every assertion that's made in the book. So there's none of this, oh, I think this and you might think that, but there's none of that wishy-washy stuff. You'll get a scientific reference for almost everything that's said in the book. You might not like that, but as a scientist myself, I love that about the book. There's no debate around the issues. The numerous cameos by the well-known athletes are a great way to illustrate many of the points that come up in the book. So whereas there's scientific reference, there's also anecdotal reference from a whole range of athletes. I particularly liked BJ Miller, the swimmer.
Fantastic.
Seems to have a brilliant attitude towards food.
Yes, I felt the same as I was speaking to her, but I will say I felt honored and lucky to speak to every single one of them. I mean, their stories were all amazing, but yes.
Yeah, and there are some, as runners, there are some fantastic, well-known personalities in that book too. Must have been fun talking to them all. My take on messages personally are that I need to eat more protein and probably keep fueled up by adding healthy snacks into my day. So that's like a double whammy, double win for me. I get to have a bit more of everything and fuel up. And I think Liz and I have added fueling on the run to be practiced as part of our long run, to be ready to take in more on race day, to get practice to take in more on race day. Something that we didn't touch on as well that's in the book is there are actually meal suggestions, or, here's a typical day's meal for doing X or Y, which is actually great because you're reading and you go 30 grams of protein or 40 grams of protein so many times a day. What does that mean? And you actually then go, ta-da, this is what it means. This is what it means. Have this for breakfast, have this for, and you go, oh, okay, I see that. Oh, that's quite a lot. Oh, that's more than I eat. And then that gives you the sort of clue and the positioning. So it was super from that point of view. So those are the things I enjoyed about the book. Liz, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just elaborate on that. Those meal suggestions, they're great because they show you really practically what it means to eat 40 grams of protein, let's say. But yeah, it really made me realize that I kind of need to up my game. I kind of already knew it because I've been told that in the past, that like I might need more protein because I'm an athlete. But it's always hard because you get a bit of conflicting information, because if you go see your family doctor, they're just like, the RDA, the recommended daily allowance is, I don't know, 0.8 grams per kilogram or something. And I'm pretty sure I'm meeting that, because that's not really hard. It's only like 50 grams for the whole day or something.
Totally.
Yeah. And so now seeing that, masters athletes, they should be having, 30 or 40 grams of protein, and it should be not 3 times a day, but more like probably like 4 times a day, or I guess more is better to some degree. It really highlights that that maybe I need 2 eggs with my breakfast or something. So, so those were great. I thought it had a lot of great information, and like Alan said, backed up by science. I like the tables to summarize the information. So, a lot of the time you would have, let's say, the recommended amount of carbs. Well, it would differ if you're exercising for an hour a day versus 1 to 3 hours a day versus like 4 or 5 hours a day. And Lauren included little charts, so you could kind of go find yourself in those, and instead of rereading the paragraph after you're done to try and figure out which one applies to you. I love that Lauren also acknowledges that eating enough food is actually hard work, and it's actually kind of like your training plan. So you have a plan for training, and some of us, me, would probably benefit from a plan for eating, at least in terms of like, okay, well, I should probably have hours where maybe I have a timer that goes off and says like, I don't know, you haven't eaten for 3 hours, because for me, because I'm still working, I feel like sometimes the day just goes by so fast and you don't even notice the hours fly by. And so that sort of view of having, viewing your nutrition as part of training is really powerful. And just as a little aside, I mean, I love the cover photo on the book. It's a runner and a cyclist, and they look like they're working pretty hard. So I feel like it represents the target audience very well for the book. So.
Well, thank you so much. I will say that phenomenal woman on the cover happens to be one of my closest friends. I've been friends with her for over 20 years. And as I was writing the book, I said, can we get a cover picture for you? Will you please be on my cover? She's a phenomenal athlete and a wonderful human. I don't know the gentleman, but I do know the woman.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a fun thing we got to include her.
She has great running style, that's for sure.
So thank you for listening to another episode of the Running Book Reviews podcast. Big thanks to the publisher, Human Kinetics, for providing review copies of the book. And thanks to Lauren. Well, thanks to Lauren's friend, Erica from Go Running Tours Chicago, for suggesting the book and putting us in touch with Lauren. And of course, thanks to Lauren for spending time with us today for recording this podcast. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast in your favorite streaming platform.
And that's all for Running Book Reviews. Catch you next time.
Bye for now.